Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Marie McGillycuddy. I'm live streaming from the beautiful island of Puerto Rico. It's actually 8 o'clock on my end here, and I think it's 7 o'clock for the majority of you that are watching tonight. Again, my name is Marie McGillycuddy. I'm the Vice President of Admissions, and I'm going to bring in Patrick in just a second. And this live stream is all about non-traditional medical students. And we are going to reveal everything about admissions, about residency, all that good stuff. And throughout the live stream, please feel free to comment any question that you have. We will tell you guys how it is. What's important to us is that at the end of this live stream, you really understand what it is to be a non-traditional student. Can you come to medical school? Can you get a residency? Can you be successful? You absolutely can. And hopefully this live stream will be able to open up your mind and so much more with the information that we can deliver to you. So again, please feel free throughout the live stream, just go ahead and comment and so on. But I'm super psyched and happy that I have one of my awesome colleagues here today, and he is the Associate Dean of Academic and Student Affairs, and I'm going to throw it right over to him. His name is Patrick McCormick. Patrick, if you can introduce yourself, who you are. Actually, it'd be awesome if you could just go through your background and all that wonderful stuff and let everybody know what you do for a living.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And thanks for having me, first and foremost. It's a pleasure. Marie knows this. I love to talk about what we do. We've talked about it in the past, and I really like to talk about our students and just this great journey that anybody who decides to go on it can look forward to. But my background is pretty simple, and I'll call it non-traditional. I studied to be an English teacher. I was an English teacher back in the 90s, and moved to New York, answered an ad in the paper, and I started working at Ross University back in 1998, and I started to understand kind of the non-traditional route to becoming a doctor practicing in the United States or Canada. And the more I worked in this avenue, the more I really, really grew to respect and value having this option to go to the Caribbean and study, and to come from perhaps a non-traditional background or a traditional background and still make your dream come true, right? So I've been doing this for nearly a quarter century. Came to UMHS 2012. And what I loved is that there was a real investment in the idea of making sure students understood the process of transitioning what they've accomplished into actual results in terms of acquiring a residency and navigating that road, right? So, and it's not easy. At what students, maybe prospective students or certainly actual students realize is that there isn't any time off from your medical studies to then start applying to residency. It happens at the same time. So knowing what to do and when to do it is essential to being able to do it efficiently and with a high quality application. So yeah, I come from a non-traditional route myself, having taught English, and then just kind of realized, you know what? I really enjoy seeing some of these victories come out of students who at first medicine wasn't necessarily their path, or that they thought medicine may not be their path or couldn't be their path. And I've been helping those kind of students for years and years.
Patrick, that's great. You know, I think the majority of the world is non-traditional, and I think
Right.
exactly, and I think that maybe what we as a society is, maybe we should get away from that term non-traditional.
Yes.
Because we're all non-traditional.
Right. Right.
We all have different paths to where we want to go, and so many of our graduates here did not come directly into UMHS from undergrad. Some were in accounting,
Right.
some worked on Wall Street, some completely changed their career. And
Yeah.
one of the questions that we get from admissions level almost on a daily basis is, look, I'm in my 30s, I'm in my 40s, I'm non-traditional. Can I get a residency?
Yeah.
And we spend a great amount of time really explaining to them how you get a residency. And yes, you absolutely can get a residency. But I think maybe, Patrick, if you can kind of guide us through how somebody gets a residency, start from point A to point Z, and what they look, because that's what you guys do. You guys have a robust department, you and your team. This is
Yeah.
what you do. Tell
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. We bring 46 years of combined experience working with Caribbean students and navigating them through the match process. And again, knowing what to do and when to do it is essential, because you don't want to spend a lot of time on the basics. So, and here are the basics. In every summer, students are qualified for the match, and we figure out who are qualified for the match through our database. We start addressing them and saying, hey, you may be qualified for the match. Work with your clinical advisors and understand whether this is your year. And if it is their year, we guide them through the process of applying to residency through the ERAS ECFMG system, and in coordination later with the NRMP, whereby they purchase a token, they populate their application throughout the summer, the summer before their match. In the fall and throughout the winter, they interview programs that liked what they presented to those programs. And the exciting time right now in February, I just talked to a few students today who are determining what their rank order list is in February after all the interviews have taken place. Students put together a rank order list of all the programs where they attended nowadays. In fact, it's now over Zoom the past 2 years for the pandemic, but also the programs put together their list of the students that they enjoyed. And the NRMP algorithm will go through its process in March. In the middle of March, we'll have the most anticipated week of the year, third week of March, still the most famous week in medicine, whether it's a 67-year-old program director somewhere, they know the third week of March is when it all happens. That's match day, match week, starting with Monday, where everybody learns whether they matched, and on Friday, they learn where they matched. And that's where it all comes to fruition. And so it's an exciting time right now. And this is the same process for any student, whatever might be considered traditional or non-traditional. And just jumping back, Marie, it's so funny when y'all were asking me about doing a live stream for non-traditional students, my first thought was, well, what's a non-traditional student? I've been doing this for years, and explain to me what a non-traditional student is. And it goes back to what you were just talking about. Like, the non-traditional is now the traditional. If you look at primary care medicine and residency programs, it never before has it been populated with people from diverse backgrounds, alternative backgrounds, a little bit older, all of the, and again, I think where the confusion comes in is that, yes, if you're applying to US medical schools, Canadian medical schools, there is this pressure to be early 20s, pre-med, bio, straight A's, the whole nine, and come from a pretty homogeneous profile in your background. Hey, my parents were doctors, I'm going to be a doctor. That's not the same perception when it comes to residency. Residencies are more attuned with the way the world is changing. And now more than ever, you'll see more residency programs populated by those who might have in the past, in the 80s, 90s, certainly the 70s, been thought as non-traditional students. Now, those type of candidates have many more attributes that they can present to the next level than it can actually set them apart and actually strengthen their application, rather than anybody worrying about it being a burden. And the success rate of our whatever might be considered non-traditional, older, different background, if students do well and apply themselves and expand their experience, and then follow the advice out of, from my team and some of the practical advice, historical advice, but also just talk with us and understand what their profile looks like at the next level, they do well. They do very, very well. But again, it comes down to performance, and so I don't know. You tell me, what's a non-traditional student? Now, you and I have had many conversations in the past about, you and I didn't think we would be working here. Well, we are, and we're loving it. Why? Because we found something that we love, and we investigated it, and we got good at it, and now this is what our careers are. So I don't know. And I feel like the world is more amenable to that kind of road than it's ever been before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Patrick, you mentioned at the beginning, as an English teacher, I moved to New York City. I went to college, and my end goal was to be a police officer.
Yeah.
That was my end goal.
Yeah.
And oh my goodness, what was it? 15, 16, 17 years ago, I just joined another university in the Caribbean. And my goal was just to be there for a year, just until I could get my citizenship. I'm originally from Ireland, and I needed to get my citizenship in order to join the NYPD. I passed everything, but I just wasn't a citizen. But then when I joined this school, and this was back in the early 2000s, went down, and I remember sitting on the front step of a new housing that was built, and there were these 3 students. One was in his early 30s, and the other were in their mid 20s. And I'm sitting there, and I didn't know how to get back to my hotel, and we were trying to figure out how to do this. I'm on this island I know nothing about. And so they came out, we shared a couple Heinekens together. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm looking at them, and I said, why are you guys going to school in the Caribbean? Can you please explain this to me? Yeah. And they sat there, and they told me their stories. And they said, one of them said, I applied to get into MD schools in the US and osteopathic schools, and I wasn't even waitlisted. And the other person said, I didn't even bother trying because I knew that with my GPAs and my MCAT that it wasn't going to happen. Yeah. The young man who was in his early 30s said, I just changed my career. He was working on Wall Street. And he said, I just did not want this for the rest of my life. And I wanted to do something that was meaningful for my community. Right. And listening, we stayed up until about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. This, of course, wasn't during classes. It was during orientation or what you call moving week, and listening to them. And then more students came, and I heard everybody else's stories, and I'm like, wait a second, what is this? And so I explored a little more, and I just decided never to leave. And then I joined UMHS about 5 years ago or so, because of the small community that is here and the amount of work and effort that I saw someone like you, Patrick, as well as other departments give and put in for students, and the passion that it doesn't matter what walk of life you're coming from, that if this is your drive, you can do it. And President Ross, we will give you the resources to get you to the end of the road, but you've got to put in the work. So let me ask you this, Patrick.
Isn't that funny? That's a terrific. I didn't know that. This is the first time you've even mentioned that. What your first experience was that prompted your motivation. People who were seeking medicine, having recognized that what they were doing or whatever wasn't what they wanted. Now, wouldn't you trust people with that motivation over a 21-year-old who's always been destined to go into medicine because his father was? They figured it out, and now they're doing this extra push to come and finally recognize and realize what they found to be true in here. It's pretty special. I didn't realize that's how you got here.
Yeah. And I never left. I got my citizenship, and I decided, you know what, this is path A. This is my path B. I'm just going to go to path Z, and we'll just go figure out the rest of the world will be. But just listening to their stories and really why they wanted to do this, it was genuine. And there's always this ideology of, okay, this is your path, right? So let me clarify, if you don't mind,
Sure.
for people who are watching,
Absolutely.
what is traditional and what is non-traditional? So traditional medical school students, if you will, because obviously Patrick and I don't really believe in that that terminology.
You tell me,
So,
I'm all ears.
so the traditional medical school students in this society, or the last umpteenth years, has been somebody that majored in biology or chemistry. They had a pre-med track. They were in a pre-health program. They
Right.
did research, volunteer, community service. They had an advisor
Great.
who said, this is it. You're going to be applying to these schools. You're going to go into the AAMC, fill out your application, choose all these schools, and then so on. And then you're immediately going to go into an allopathic track or an osteopathic track. So let's say you're 20, 21 years old when you get your bachelor's, you get that summer off, and then boom, you're in medical school. Or more recently, some folks will take a gap year and then start medical school. That is what the world would tag as traditional. And everybody else is non-traditional.
Now
What do you think?
that leaves a lot of people
Yeah,
on the peripheral, doesn't it?
it does.
And what's interesting is the amount of residency programs that are available certainly includes more than those who you just described, right? So that's interesting. Thank you I should have been taking notes. I didn't know all this time. I didn't know what a traditional, I did know. I mean, I'm joking because we just talked about it, but I kind of thought, well, yeah, that all makes sense, and those students are in earnest and they're applying and they did they did their work in their community service and volunteering. If they did well in school, great. And they applied and they got in, great. But at the end of the day, when I determined, and you tell me after this, I determined what I would be doing for my career when I was 30. I started working at Ross when I was 28. I said, this will be fine for a month. And then I realized how much it gelled with what all of that 28 years of working in other opportunities, other jobs, and had kind of led me to. And this is where I found myself. So isn't there just as huge of a population out there that has come to their self-awareness when it comes to their future at age, oh my gosh, the age of 24 or 26 or 28 or 30. This is not old, but by the traditional standard, it may keep them from pursuing that traditional route, right? But what my department does, and what I feel the three of us do in my department, we help encourage. Guess what? That brings you to the next level. What of that experience, the fact that it took you till when you were 30, or that you did this before coming to medical school, what does that give you that the traditional student may not be able to offer? And leveraging that and understanding that, owning it and being transparent about that, talking openly about that, and then just being proud of it are key to a lot of the success that we've seen.
So y'all kind of sit down with the y'all.
I say y'all too. Y'all. I'm from Central Pennsylvania. I'm from Pennsylvania, so I say y'all.
So y'all really work with the students to kind of help the student highlight themselves and their, because when you're going for residency, you kind of have to put yourself on a pedestal and show off, what your strong attributes are. We've got a couple comments here with folks asking, if I have a master's degree, maybe an MS or an MSc or an MBA, MPH, will that help my chances of getting a residency? Or, what do you think?
The way I see all of this is, my first response is, how on earth could that hurt? And here, think of it this way. When you're going out there and you're trying to explore your interests, and you explore your interests to a level where you've earned a degree, but that's also giving you the ability to say, hey, you know what? I've done this. I committed to it, but it's not for me. And you try to kind of whittle down those kind of interests and pursuits into something that truly speaks to you. And if you can take that perspective, I've done this, it wasn't quite right, but you had the courage to, at 28, 20, whatever, to then change course and go all the way back and say, this is what I've done. This is what I do, and this is what I want to do. Is that a more impressive decision, courageous decision, than to stick within whatever you got, whatever career you got out of your MBA, and just going the long haul because you went out and got a degree in that field? Okay, you're honoring the degree, but are you honoring you? So bringing that back, going through medical school, taking the skills that it took to achieve well in another degree program isn't lost in medicine. Granted, and I would argue you need to apply yourself to an even greater degree. You know, studying the Caribbean is every bit as demanding as any other curriculum in the world. But those skill sets transfer over. And now you know, hey, I was able to achieve at this level in this program. What does that mean for me in medicine? I overachieved. I want to do more. So if you take that perspective and you allow it to drive your success in medical school, and then it's on your application to the next level when it comes to residency applications. My goodness, first of all, residency programs are going to say, what drove this change? Let me ask you, Marie, like if you were to see someone who had that kind of path and you recognize that they completely slammed on the brakes and decided to change course, throwing caution to the wind, taking a leap of faith to study in the Caribbean and pursue their dream, do you think that person, what do you think of that person? Like, would you want them on your staff? Would you want them on your team?
Yeah, that's so great. That the first thing that comes to my mind, Patrick, that I would want to say to them, and what I do say, and what we all say as a team, what's your story?
Yeah.
I want to know your story. What's your story?
Yeah.
Why the heck do you want to do this? Here you are. You've just
Right.
built this career. And like you just said, I'm putting the brakes on it. And I'm saying to myself, no. That's not meant for me. This is meant for me. And I'm going to go all the way back. But to me, that's not going all the way back. To me, that's a step forward.
Yeah.
Right. So my question is, what's your story?
What's your story?
And it excites me, and it excites my entire team at admissions, because this is what we eat, breathe, and live. We want to know why you want to do this. Okay. That's very important to us. And we will be able to understand very quickly if this is a genuine interest for you, or if you're just doing this because you feel like you have to do it or whatever.
Right.
Differentiate that right away. And the second thing is, what are you going to do with this at the end of the day? So there's a huge correlation between the beginning of admissions and then when they come see you guys, your team, because it's still the same question. What's your story?
Yeah. What's your story?
It's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Your story automatically is more unique than the traditional story, right? If you have the passion, the academic performance, the motivation, the CV, projecting that you really, really, this is it, you found it, then your story just puts you over the top. And again, and I may have said this earlier, excuse me if I'm repeating myself, but again, the perspective at the residency level is different from the perspective at the admissions level when it comes to who traditionally is afforded privilege to travel this path, right? Mm-hmm. And so when they're looking for that's what they're looking for. They're looking for your story and how did you make good on it? And how will that make you a great physician? It's funny, like, what time is it? 7:24. About, I would say, 2.5 hours ago, I was talking to a student who would have been considered non-traditional. It's one of my favorite times of year. I'm talking to students who have gone on interviews and they're trying to decide what their rank order list is going to be. She got 14 interviews. She's doing really well. She's knocking it out of the park. And this is my favorite time of year for that, but I also like to remind them, hey, by the way, I just want, right now you're dealing with the problem you want to have. Which of these 14 interviews do I want to rank higher than the other, right? And I say to her, I said, what'd you think 3.5 years ago when you were taking a chance, like, I'm going to the Caribbean to study medicine. I hope this works out. And she started laughing, like, yeah, it really is something. It really is amazing to be able to have the reality of my efforts pay off in all of these opportunities. And she's going to spin wheels. She's going to be great. Obviously, I can't tell you who it is, but we have dozens and dozens of those stories where, I don't know. I can't say that I would have the courage to go ahead and change gears and throw myself into the Caribbean to go to study medicine. But my goodness, when I see these students who've made that decision and then just put their foot to the grindstone, studied and studied and studied, understanding that performance makes the difference. Programs don't care where you came from. They care what you've done. Mm-hmm. And if you do that and you remember that, and then you consult people that have been able to help students for a long time, understand what makes sense for them and developing a track to their career success, the sky's wide open. I'm sorry, here, this about me, Marie, I talk.
This is wonderful because it's important. People need to hear
I've been doing this for so long.
Yeah, they need to understand that, it is about you, the student, at the end of the day, and everybody that's just situated around you, in particular, Patrick and your team. Yeah. We're here to guide you to make sure that you get from point A to point Z. But really, at the end of the day, it comes down to the student. You've got to be disciplined. You've got to put in the work. You have to perform very well. Right. And when you're, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of, let's say, your residency interview, right? When you get there, the residency director, obviously you have got to be academically competent. You're going to be a physician. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You have got to be academically competent. But when you're in that residency interview, by the time you get to the residency interview, you've already passed all the initial stages, right?
Yeah, so they've said yes to a lot of things at that point.
A lot. And so when you're sitting in front of this team of individuals, they're trying to figure out, do I want to put up with this person for 3 years, PGY 1, 2, and 3, and then maybe a possible fellowship? And then you're trying to figure out, can I put up with these people? And that's kind of how the match happens. But again, that's where your story initially kind of comes in, because they want to understand your personality, because you're not just representing yourself. You will be representing the hospital and the community that you will be serving at the end of the day. Did I get that? Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. And who do you think has an advantage in that situation? A 22-year-old who's never been on an interview, or a 30-year-old who's had a career and understands how to be a professional and understands that when they're sitting in front of an interview committee, they've already said yes to their experience. They don't have to apologize or rationalize or anything for their journey. All they have to do is talk in earnest and transparently about who they are and why they're going to be a fantastic physician for their program. And not without giving too much away of the inside baseball of how we talk to our students, but that's just scratching the surface of so many of the ways that we talk to these students and say, listen, this is a great. I could talk forever about this subject alone, but once you get the interview, it's so important that students understand they've said yes to how you got there. You don't have to talk about it. All of a sudden, they love their story. All you have to do is let your story get you over the hump. And that's really the magic of it. If students can hear that, allow it to disarm them, right? And then just, you know what? here I am, and this is who I am, and this is my journey. And we've had so many stories where students have been able to convert that, that moment into success through one thing: authenticity. And it's a beautiful thing. It'll happen again this year. I always pull all the students, all our matching students, give me some feedback. I always love learning from our students. That's one of our favorite ways of gathering information. What was your experience? Feed it back in, and then we feed it back into the next class. This is what they're telling you. This is where, this is what their experience has been. But I love hearing these stories of success and how, if I might digress, I know we're going a little bit long, but in my very first experience back in 98, I was hired as a writer, writing what was then called the Dean's Letter. It's now called the MSPE, the Medical Student Performance Evaluation. It's one of the two documents that's required from a medical school to supply to residency programs. And I was hired to help compose these letters. And one of my first students I wrote for, was a student who had come to the United States from Iran when he was I guess he was an early teenager. He first learned English. He drove cab, and then he found his way into an undergraduate program, and his mission was medicine. And of course, if you didn't learn English until you were a teenager, you're not going to be applying to medical school when you're 20. So he applied when he was 28, whatever. And the gratitude in his eyes when he matched at a program based on his achievements in what? Medicine, medical school. It sold me. And that was now 24 years ago. And I've been doing it ever since. And that feeling, seeing that in students' eyes, converting it into success, is kind of what propels me from year to year. It's great stuff. It's great stuff.
Yeah, I absolutely second that. Same
Non-traditional student, probably.
Yes.
Thematically, right?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. You actually made my hairs stand up just listening to that, because, when I train my team, when they're interviewing students, or when they're talking to students or advising students, or whenever, one thought that I want us to have in our minds when we're reviewing students, interviewing them, or whatever the case is, can I see this individual in the future holding a needle over my family member, over my grandmother, my grandfather?
Right.
And it's a genuine thought, and that's important, because again, based on their story, and if their academics kind of everything just meshes together, then let's do this. And then a few years later, they come to you, and it's just, I think we might be repeating. I've got a couple comments here.
If I can just jump on that, see, you know me.
Yeah, go ahead, do it.
Give me 30 seconds. Marie, that is perfect. Because my first year at UMHS, 2012, we had a graduating class. And this speaks to what you were just talking about. We went to the graduation ceremony. I sat next to a student who was, he was at retirement age, right? And I know, and I knew that he had
a student that was graduating who was at the national retirement age?
Retirement age. I don't want to give away age, but he had matched. Wow. He was a fantastic student. And going back to your needle comment, he was sitting to my right. His son was sitting to his right. He got up to go to the bathroom. The son moved over and talked to me. He said, I just want to thank you in the school. I said, oh, it's naturally our pleasure. And he said, I just want you to know. And what's funny is, okay, so he and his father disagreed on everything politically, like everything in the world politically. They were arguing about something. I was sitting over there going, where's the bread? But they were talking about something. He gets up and leaves. The son goes over and he says into my ear, my father and I don't agree on anything. But if there's someone I want standing over me because I have a medical issue and I need intervention, I want it to be my father. And right there, I was like, wow, what else can you ask? From a son, but also from the type of person, irrespective of age or background and all that, that should be a doctor, right?
Yeah.
And he had the merit, he had the background, he had the scores, he had the achievement, and he did it.
Mm-hmm.
Son couldn't have been more proud. Sorry.
No, Patrick, that just meshes perfectly together.
Yeah.
And doesn't it, this is my first, I think one of my first live streams I've ever done. So it's not seeing an audience is
me too. I have no idea what's going on up there.
I do have a couple questions that I'm going to get to in just a second, but I mean, if you think about it, at the end of the day, we want to graduate passionate physicians who are going to give back to their communities, and to be able to just be a part or just be in the presence of these individuals, these great minds that have decided to pursue medicine, right. Non-traditional route, or however anybody wants to look at that. That's an honor. That's an honor. Yeah. I know I do not want to be a physician. And so I feel very privileged listening to the stories, and then being able to, from an admission standpoint, see students start, and then come graduation. And I can't wait to have graduation in person again, to see everyone, and the same thing with you and the rest of everybody at our university, see everybody cross the stage and then go off and go be PGY1s and then keep moving up. It's just,
that's why I asked that question during this time of year. I said, can you imagine when you were looking around, making the decision, here you are. And it's amazing how many of them smile, laugh, and just say, yeah, it's amazing. You're right. Because sometimes they get so into it that they forget to step back and go, remember 4 years ago when you didn't think this was possible?
Yeah.
Well, no,
it's absolutely possible. It's just you stick to it. You get rid of all your social media profiles and you just focus. focus. That was my little plug to just get a Pomodoro calculator or something to figure that you're staying on time and being disciplined. Let me just shoot some questions out here, if you don't mind, because I think that you would be the best person to give advice on this. What kind of considerations should non-traditional students have when thinking about which residency specialty to pursue? It's an interesting question that we do get sometimes too. Mm-hmm.
What kind of considerations? Mm-hmm. Oh, that's an interesting question. I think it implies that maybe there are certain fields that would be open to non-traditional students more than the others. At which I say, well, maybe, but maybe not. When I go and speak, I go to St. Kitts and I speak to students. We have office hours. I do a presentation. I sit with them. I talk with them. And the Maine, when they go to Maine, I sit and I talk with them. I really want to get to know these students. And one of the things I make sure to say at the beginning of my presentation in Maine, now this is after 2 years, right, of medical training. I say, how many students here know what they want to do yet? And maybe a third raise their hands. Maybe a couple others feel pressure to raise their hand because they think the right answer is that I know. And I say, okay, you can put your hands up. I want to let you know that it doesn't matter whether or not you know what you want to do right now. Your clinical training is supposed to bring that out. Nobody is impressed by someone who thinks they know what they want to do when they're 14 years old or 20 years old or 21 years old. No one is more impressed by a 30-year-old or non-traditional student who thinks they know what they want. If you do, that's great, but it doesn't preclude you from any specialty. Being of a certain age or a certain background doesn't preclude you from a certain specialty. I think there might be some people like, does it preclude me from surgery? Or that a lot, a lot of the time that depends on the individual, and we can have that conversation. But in my estimation, I haven't seen anybody who, now that I understand what it is, non-traditional student, not be able to pursue the field that he or she is inclined for and has the right merit in order to get into it, have trouble based on the fact that they were considered non-traditional. It's never been reported back to me. Not that it may not exist, but I just don't know about it. And I've been doing this for a long time. So I would say, don't allow your state and life to govern your interest. Allow your interest to govern, what happens next. And you'll never be dishonorable to yourself by doing that.
Yeah, right on. Perfectly said. We have another question here for both of us. I'll take the first half and then have you take the second half. What are some preconceived notions that you see non-traditional students have when starting medical school? And then again, applying for residency and even beyond that, that you wish you could help them dispel, or maybe we can give them some advice about. So let me dispel the preconceived notions of some non-traditional students when they start medical school. Right off the bat, what I can think of and what I know students have said is, I'm scared. I don't know if I can handle the amount of work. I haven't been in school in over 10 years. Or I have a family and my family's coming down with me. I don't know if I can do this. There's a lot of, I don't know, I'm nervous, fear. It's okay. You're not alone. So many other individuals have been in the exact same position. Absolutely. They have the exact same feelings as you when you start medical school. Of course, the anxiety is there, not just because you're a non-traditional student. The anxiety is there for everyone starting. What I can tell you honestly and openly is medical school is like a fire hydrant, and you open that hose and you've got to take all that information in and try not to leave any of that water go past you. That's how much information you're going to get. And the best thing to do is to prepare.
Yes.
What I can say we do here at UMHS is we spend a lot of time reviewing your case. So we're going to review you as an individual, basically from head to toe, holistically, separate from anybody else. Again, we want to know your story, and we also need to take a deep dive into your academics. So if you had taken courses, let's say 10 or 15 years ago, I'm going to tell you right now, you need to take some of those courses again, because you're not going to be at the level that you need to be in order to perform in medical school. So what we say to students all the time is, send us your transcripts. We'll check them out. We'll see how you've done academically. And then if these courses are well over many years ago, we're going to say, look, you're going to need to retake them, because trust us, it's going to help you at the end of the day. And the MCAT exam. Yeah. You don't want to apply to medical school with a transcript from many years ago. Of course, you have to submit your transcripts. We have to see them, but you want to make sure that you've taken courses within at least the last 3 to 4 years, and your MCAT within the last 3 years. That's not just to get into medical school. That's more important for you as the student to see where you stand academically. Because if you're here academically, and this is where you need to be to start basic sciences in medical school, then you owe it to yourself to bring yourself there, so that when you get here, you keep going up rather than going down. So we want to make sure that you are as prepared as possible to successfully progress when you get into medical school. The biggest difference here at UMHS is we do not accept hundreds of students. Number one, we can't, because our facilities don't hold hundreds of students. Number two, we don't want to. We're a teeny tiny school. This is what the President Ross, this is his mission, his vision. And we want to make sure that when students come in, that we know you by name, and that we can be able to give you the resources that you need. And you as the student also So take those resources and go with them. And we want to see you get all the way to the end. So back to, I kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but I think that that helps with answering maybe some questions that some students might have right now. But don't be nervous. Don't be scared. Actually, that's horrible for me to say. You are going to be nervous. You are going to be
right.
scared.
I mean,
reality.
And it'd be crazy not to be, right? Like, what kind of superpower do you have that you're not a little bit nervous, a little bit scared about jumping on a plane and going and getting your medical education in another country? Who is that? That's just natural.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what the original question.
I'll rephrase it real quick. What are some preconceived notions that we see non-traditional students when they start medical school and then when they apply for residency or even after residency? Maybe I'm thinking of one thing. You might not get a residency because of your age or something. I'm just throwing that out there because we do hear that from students when they call in and they say, "Oh, I'm 40 years old. I don't know if I'll get a residency." Just some preconceived,
But you've also, to me, it's kind of like, well, I'm 20 years old. I don't know if I'll get a residency. I'm 30 years. If you put in the work, at the end of the day, your non-traditional status will work to your advantage if all other things are in place. What's more impressive, a 40-year-old with uncommon motivation or a 20-year-old with uncommon motivation? You tell me. I'm not saying either one is right. I'm just saying at the residency level, there's a lot that comes with a 20-year-old and there's a lot that comes with a 40-year-old. And everybody listening to this can do the math on what comes with a 40-year-old who has every bit of the motivation as a 20-year-old, right? So the preconceived notion, I think that what we're hovering around, right, Maria, is that getting into medical school and this perception that there is this slightly older than Doogie Howser version of the ideal applicant to medical school. I don't know. When did you get your professional feet under you? We just talked about it, when we're about 30. I would say those preconceived notions are there for a reason. They're based on kind of those fears, right? The fears that surround, I'm not doing things the way things are supposed to be done. Okay. Well, but what does that mean on the other end of that argument? Isn't there a whole plus side to doing things the way they're not supposed to be done, in terms of maybe not supposed to be done, but aren't normally done? In medicine, you want to do things the way they're supposed to be done, but you get what I'm saying. Like, coming to something later, I just don't see it. I don't think it's viewed the same way at the residency level as it is at the admissions level, and not here, obviously, but where they may have felt some blockades. So some of those preconceived notions, if you don't have a biology background, a science background, you might be a little older. We've worked, and I've worked for nearly a quarter century, and my team works with students on understanding how we can, or not understanding, but how to get students to understand how to have that work to their advantage. And then really it all comes down to the pudding. How did you do? Did you pass the USMLE with a great score? It's the same for everybody. No one's going to give up on a non-traditional student who has a great USMLE score for some 20-something with an average score. I just don't buy it, and I haven't seen it, and the data doesn't bear it out.
Awesome. Patrick. I think we can maybe sum this up. I think we got to some of the comments and questions that students had. Us just speaking. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask you like, if there's a prospective student out there and who's maybe not convinced, who still has questions, what would they recommend? What would you recommend they do in terms of contacting the school, reaching out? What would you like to do?
Yeah.
No.
Good question. you can hop on our webpage and click on the contact us, and our pictures are up there, and whoever you feel comfortable reaching out to, you can just go ahead and
Yeah. Okay.
call us or text us or send us an email.
Yeah.
The best thing for us, and again, you can contact me directly. I'll be more than happy to respond and to guide you accordingly. I just ask that you go ahead and drop your transcripts, or just provide me as much information as possible, so that I can give you the best advice possible. And in typical New York fashion, I will give the good, the bad, and the realistic view of everything, because I think that our society, we need to stop sugarcoating things and just be genuine, open, and honest, and say, hey, what we need at the end of the day, Patrick, and you can totally agree with this, because you spoke about this at the beginning, we need more doctors. We need more inclusive doctors, so that when folks go there, they can see somebody that looks like them, that has the same alternative background as them, whatever the case is. We need that. We need, can you just imagine someone going to see a physician that was a complete career change? Or sometimes, obviously, this might not be transparent for students, but you could be a patient and you knowingly are searching out a PCP, a primary care physician, that you would feel comfortable with. And if you know that, okay, I just left a career of 20 years here and I'm doing something else, not medical related, but I'm going to go see a doctor that has somewhat of a similar situation, that comfort level, because, going to see a doctor and having, whatever exam done, it's always kind of a little awkward, but just having that little comfort line. And what we're seeing more and more in healthcare, in offices, are the bios. Physicians are putting their bios out there so that you can choose the physician that you want. And if you're 30 years old and you didn't realize until just now that this is the path that I want, it's okay to be afraid.
Sure.
And we're here. We will answer you and we'll help you as much as possible. And if that means continuing with UMHS or maybe another school, because there are, let me just say this, there are some students that have called in, they have given me their transcripts, and I have told them, go apply to a school in the United States. Your MCAT score is such and such that you will most likely get into US med school. And then they'll say, oh, well, but I'm 28 years old. I'm like, just do it. And if you don't, then go ahead and call us back. But I'm looking at your information, and this is my best advice for you at that moment, in typical New York fashion.
Yeah. And the same respect, transparency, you bring that up. We serve no student by telling them something that's not true, right? So at your level and at my level, when a student whose aim is not meeting their target, we have that conversation. And here's what you must do. Or this may not work out for you, but you need to listen now, because I'm not dealing with you personally. This is not me saying that you're going to be a bad professional in any field. What I'm saying is that your merits aren't living up to what I know to be true, given the data for years and years. And you need to make an adjustment, or you need to be thinking about things a different way. As much as these stories can be inspirational, we have an obligation to our students to let them know where their performance is meeting or not meeting expectations. And of course, if they're exceeding expectations, what that can open that up to. But we have those conversations. There's nothing left on the table. Students, when they're talking to my team, this is something we talk about a lot. There are some hard conversations we have to have now and again. But it's important we have those, because then the students appreciate knowing where they stand, knowing what the true horizon may look like. So we have those as well. So, just like any other medical school, students realize things throughout their journey. Most of the time it's good, but most of the time maybe they find out maybe this isn't for me, or they're underperforming their expectations. And we have ways to intervene and talk to them about it and let them know what they might consider going forward. So, Anyway, I guess maybe we've overtalked this a little bit. But yeah, it's funny that Maria, you and I, when we talk, a half an hour conversation clearly always turns into an hour conversation.
It's true.
It's usually my fault, but whatever.
It's no one's fault. It's called just how it naturally flows. And I think that's,
well, I think we both enjoy what we do.
That. Yeah.
That's one thing.
Exactly.
But I hope some people out there in internet world got something out of this, and it was certainly fun.
We just have one last question that came in, and
okay.
I hope that if I'm reading this right, would you recommend for an IMG to reattend med school in the US to increase the chance of matching? You won't be able to reattend a medical school once you graduate with an MD from UMHS. You wouldn't be able to attend another medical school in the US. I think that was.
Yeah, I'm not understanding the question, but you have to achieve the same milestones at UMHS in terms of USMLE and all the standards that you would at any other medical school. So you wouldn't be able to go back and achieve that all over again. You have your record. They're normalized. The USMLE and your score on the USMLE compares you to the entire field, US and otherwise international. Yeah. Which can be to your advantage, especially if you perform well. But once that's done, that's done.
I think, Patrick, I don't mean to cut you off, but wasn't it like a stereotype maybe 15, 20 years ago that if you were an IMG, and for anybody who's watching, an IMG is an international medical graduate, and if you come to a school in the Caribbean, you will be considered an IMG. But just to clarify, when you go to a school in the Caribbean like UMHS, the only thing you're doing here is you're doing the didactic part, the basic sciences. Everyone then returns to the US to do the clinical rotations. Same books, same classes, same exams, same rotations. It's just another route. Just to clarify that real quick. And
we're actually referred to as a hybrid school, which means our didactics are done in a classroom that might be in a foreign country, but it's the same kind of auditorium, same lab practicals, same gross anatomy. And our facilities, as you know, are exceptional in that capacity. But then the third and fourth year are conducted in the United States alongside US medical students, right? So that connotates a hybrid, help me, a hybrid model.
Right?
A hybrid model where the actual clinical education is done in the United States alongside US medical students. So that gives students an advantage naturally, obviously, when it comes to being able to understand the US clinical climate. And for Canadians coming as well, we have Canadian rotations as well for anybody whose aspirations might be to go back north. But yeah, so it is important to make that distinction.
And I think like 20, 25, 30 years ago, there was this stereotype that if you graduated from an offshore an offshore school, that your chances would be a little bit trickier of getting a residency. But I think that was just more talk than anything else, because like you said, at the end of the day, you're taking the exact same exams, and that's exactly how you are being judged.
Well, I think what's happened is that the culture has changed, right? The perspective on what is a potentially good doctor has changed, right? And they're not putting everybody into a category. So while there was some bias, some major league bias back in the 70s, 80s, into the 90s, that is changing because some of the math is adding up, right? And the world is changing. The value of a diverse background has increased in its stock value, right? It's gone up. Worldliness, having a different perspective has gone up. So whatever might have been true in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, you can put that aside. Yeah. Look what's going on this century. It's far different.
Yeah. Agreed. Patrick, this was awesome.
This was fun.
Great conversation. I think maybe we should end it here, or else we're just going to keep everybody up all night.
I know. I'm sure everybody's still hanging on with bated breath.
Well, do you have any last minute words of advice or encouragement for the non-traditional student?
Just if you're passionate, if you know your academics can keep up, keep up, if you can produce, don't go into because you think it might be fun to be a doctor. If you've always thought maybe you could be a doctor, no. If you really, really have the drive and you've figured out at a different time than most people figure out that you want to be a physician, it can happen, but it has to be earnest, it has to be genuine, and you really have to have the goods. And if you have the goods, if it's true or not. Will you sit and study the hours that it takes to produce a great score in the USMLE? And if you don't know what the USMLE is, start studying what that is. I mean, there are normalizing attributes out there that you have to maximize, right? But you will if you have that. But if you want to do it on a lark, or if you're not really convinced, this isn't for you. I'll tell you straight out. But for those who it is, it could be the best decision they ever made.
Perfectly said, Patrick. I think the best thing that I can say to everyone is, if this is your calling, to mimic everything Patrick just said, if this is truly your calling at the end of the day, it does not matter what stage in your life, you can do it. You can absolutely do it. Back to what's your story? That's what we want to know. And if before you even start the journey, feel free to reach out, and we would be happy to be very transparent and let you know realistically what would work for you and what path you should take. But again, I want to mimic everything Patrick just said. If this is your calling, you can do it. You're going to be afraid, you're going to be sweating, you're going to be anxious, your heart's going to be racing. But let me tell you, we've seen thousands of graduates do it. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining us and listening to Patrick and myself go off on a little bit of a tangent. Okay. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you very much, Marie. Thanks for inviting me, and good luck to everybody out there with what you decide to do.
Awesome. I guess we'll just let our team know. You can go ahead and